Hello, everybody, and welcome to In the Paint with Christy Winter Scott right here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast network. I am thrilled and beyond excited to share this paint with one of the iconic women in sports, not just basketball, but because of basketball, Ann Meyers Drysdale. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how you doing, Christy?
I'm doing great now.
Good.
You know me. Every time I see you, I have to grab you. I say thank you, maybe 100 times.
Well, you do such a great job. I always love listening to you, and you know the history. I think that's the important thing that, I think the young reporters and broadcasters today, they do such a great job, but they don't know the history. And that's so important. I was talking to somebody with baseball that played back in the 60s, and he said, it's too bad that these young guys today just don't know the history of baseball. And it's a true, not just with basketball, women's basketball especially. And Liz McQuitter, who played at Vegas and played at DePaul, played for Doug Bruno, who, our dear friend and a Hall of Fame coach, is retiring, but played for him in the WBL for the Hustle, the Chicago Hustle. And, just names like that. And the fact that we had a WBL way before the WNBA, and those women that broke ground, and the AAU women before that.
Yeah, no, it's simply amazing. And, going back to baby Ann Meyers, and you were one of 11 children, first of all, brothers and sisters. I mean, I only had one older brother, and I was kind of like the little sister to him, obviously, but all of his friends. So I was like the little sister of our community group of people who were just out hooping on the outdoor courts. But for you, you had not only a team, but you had a sub coming in for one of the teams. You had 11 siblings. What was that dynamic like when you were elementary age?
Well, I think like any family, whether you have, one child, two child, five children, whatever, it's the dynamics of your parents, whether they're in music or whether they're in math or they're teachers and so forth. And my dad had played basketball at Marquette. My mom came from a big family. And so we were surrounded by sports. My sister Patty was the oldest, and she was 8 years older than I was. So I had a great role model in her, but also a wonderful role model in my mother and our parents, as far as understanding work ethic and teamwork, and certainly with that big a family, and how to coordinate things together, jobs that we had to do, whether it was doing the dishes or taking the trash out or dusting or vacuuming and making beds and doing the laundry, just helping my mom out. My dad was out working and so forth. So, you learn the work ethic and the discipline. And certainly sports was such a great outlet with such a big family. I was always watching my older sister, Patty. She was probably the best athlete in the family. And then I was between two boys, my brother David and my brother Jeff. And it's like you, went out with their friends and always playing, whether we were playing over the line or football in the street or, 500 or basketball or whatever it was. I was always out there playing with them. And so they toughened me up because I was really kind of a baby out there and would cry when I got knocked down and so forth. And but they said, hey, you keep going home and crying to mom and dad, you're not going to play anymore. So I had to toughen up quick.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So where do you fall in the line of the 11? Like what?
I'm right in the middle. I have three older brothers and two older sisters, and two younger brothers and three younger sisters.
Wow. My goodness, man.
Yeah.
I remember Dawn Staley talking about having 7 siblings in her house and how it was so crowded, and sports was an outlet. Was that it for you guys too? Like, just get outside of the house because it's so crowded in there.
I think that was great for my mom. She needed that space, and
Right.
Certainly just being there for her, because my dad traveled. He worked for a company called Sears, which, like a lot of companies today are going out of business, but he traveled a lot and so forth. But when he was home, we were always my mom and dad are from Milwaukee, and we lived in Chicago, so we were big Green Bay Packer fans. And
Nice.
basketball, the NBA was not on that much. It was on one game a weekend on a Sunday after church or something like that. And we were either watching the Packers and Vince Lombardi and what the Packers were doing, or we were watching one NBA game. And certainly today it's so different. I mean, you can turn on any time, any day, and you've got any kind of sport you want to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. When you were trying to play basketball, I thought this was such a fascinating story. There were after school events, which they have now, in middle
Right.
school, preschool, and high school. But for you in elementary school, you were what, 11 years old, and they had after school program for boys for basketball, and you weren't permitted to play. Assess what that first of all felt like for you, because all you wanted to do was hoop and you didn't have the platform until there were people who stepped into that gap and stood up for that.
Yeah, and I kind of dealt with that. I went to school in the elementary school in the 50s and 60s, and went to the parochial schools when we were back in Chicago, and certainly that was a time when girls wore skirts and dresses to school, and I always wore shorts underneath because at recess I would go, get a ball and shoot baskets, and the boys really wouldn't shoot with me because well, I was a girl, and then but they all come to my side of the court because I was the only one shooting. So everybody else had another ball, and there wasn't enough balls for the boys. So
Right.
they'd come over, and then at recess, that we'd play these hard tag games or like football stuff. And I had a teacher come out and say, this is not ladylike. You're not supposed to play sports. But that's not how I grew up in my household. My parents were very supportive of their daughters playing sports as much as they were their boys. And so I didn't understand that transition into the educational world.
Right.
And certainly we still deal with it today, over 50 years later since Title IX. But,
Yes.
so you get these mixed feelings. But I also, what came into existence was the presidential competition that John F. Kennedy, when he was president, introduced into the schools for young kids to compete and get a presidential patch, a presidential fitness patch. And you got one too?
I
So,
did.
but I was in the beginning. That started in the 60s when he was president. And
Mhm.
so you had the broad jump, you had the softball throw, you had the 50-yard dash, you had pull-ups, you had, sit-ups and so forth. So I was very competitive because of our parents, and certainly
Right.
competitive against the boys in school. And so that was a great outlet for me. But then when they had the after-school sports program with basketball for the boys, my parents had to go through the school district and the principal and parents to get it okayed that
That's
I could play with the boys in fifth and sixth grade on the after school sports program. And certainly, and we know today that young girls mature a little bit faster than boys do it in the elementary years. And I was faster and I was a little taller and so forth. But because of my parents and their fight, I
that's
wasn't as tall as you, that's for sure. But and I love when you wear your heels.
yeah.
Um, but they got me to play on the team, and again, my sister Patty was out there. My brother Mark and Tom were playing at the local high school and in football and basketball. My brother David was at the junior high, and so that our names, the Myers name in the community, was starting to, get out there because of the different sports that my older siblings were competing in.
Right. Oh no, that's amazing, first of all. But kudos to your parents for
Yeah,
not just saying that's the way life goes. You'll get your chance one day. But they went and knocked on some doors and made some
yeah.
calls and said, no, you're going to let her do what she would like to do too, and the
Well,
equality.
and as you well know, it's where any of us are. It's the support system that you have, whether it's grandparents or whether it's teachers, whether your parents or your siblings or cousins or whatever. That base, that support is so important for our confidence and for us to do the things that we do.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that presidential patch thing, listen, when you had to hold on to the bar, and that I was shaking my little skinny body, holding up on there, like trying to keep my chin above the bar. Yeah,
I
I
know. Yeah,
did.
we were so light then. Now I can just, yeah, I'm like you. I can just hang there now. That's it.
But yeah, no, those were great days. I think, when I was in elementary, that's what that was, right? The shuttle run, and the competition with boys and girls, and what that felt like. Absolutely, you
Yeah.
knew who the competitors were.
Yeah,
In
and I had a fifth grade
class.
teacher. It was the first male teacher that I had in elementary school. That we finally went to the public schools back in California,
Okay.
and he had been in the war, and so we did at our PE class, or we would do marching. So
Oh,
again, setting up the discipline.
yeah.
We played prison ball, and he would make me throw left-handed because I threw pretty hard as a girl, and he made me throw left-handed. and which helped me again. Who
Right.
knew down the road that that would benefit me? And so just having again teachers that recognize your strengths and different things and support.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I wish somebody would have done that because my left hand, I still won't shoot. My left hand is still pretty bad. Yeah, that's my nickname was the fugitive because I was like just so that's yeah, that's a funny joke. But yeah,
Yeah, but you did good stuff on that right side, boy.
yeah, that's what I was like. You can't right
Yeah,
is still
you
going
can't
pretty
stop that. Why go left?
just keep it going. But yeah, that was yeah, we need to tuck that nickname away. But anyway, but with your just progress through middle school and then to high school and then you saw your game develop. What was it about basketball that number one drew you to it, but also gave you the passion to continue to grow as a student athlete?
Well, my dad, for one, he was the captain of the 1945 team in Marquette, and so he played basketball. He played AAU, and so when we moved out to California, my brothers and sisters played. He would come down to the local elementary school. They'd always have the festival to raise money and so forth, and he would do a basketball thing with all the kids in the neighborhood and so forth. And it was a great outlet. I mean, I saw my sister, I think at the age of 15, 14 or 15, I started playing AAU, which is completely different today, club teams. Back in the day, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was AAU for older women that were in college and out of college. So you had National Business College, you had the Raytown Piperettes, you had Anna Mill out of California, you had Wayland Baptist. So you had all these women that were in the 19, 20, 20, early 20s, late 20s. They were playing basketball, and so I would see my sister play. And I think that was the one thing that I also got from my family is that we always went to our siblings' games. There was such a support system there, and you saw the crowd cheering, and you saw the competition. And my brothers were competitive, my sister was competitive, and I would go watch her play softball against Joan Joyce and Shirley Topley and all these great softball players. And those games were like 20 something innings, and we wouldn't get home till 1 o'clock, and the score was 1-0. And but the competition, how competitive they were. I would play basketball with her when I was 15, join the AAU team, and go to the AAU tournaments in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and Gallup, New Mexico. And but I would see the Julene Simpson, who was Brzezinski at the time, became the captain of our Olympic team in '76 and was my roommate. I saw Gwen Bachman, who was probably the first 7-footer back out of Colorado. We had a 6'8" gal, Mary Mitchell, on our team. Mavis Washington, who was one of the first blacks to play in Southern California. I played against Marion Washington, and then I would play with Marion, Ellen Mosier, and then Sherry Rapp, and Carolyn Bush from Wayland Baptist. And so you saw all these women playing, women that were ahead of me. And my sister probably played against one of the greatest players to play, Nera White from National Business College. And so I saw women playing, even though Title IX had not passed. And I still kind of laugh and scratch my head when I hear women, even today, say, well, we didn't have sports. I said, it was there. You had to go find it because there were women competing. I read a book in fourth grade on Babe Didrikson Zaharias, 1932 Olympic athlete. And she was one of the first LPGA gals, but she opened the doors for a lot of athletes and certainly opened the door for me. And then in '74, Billie Jean King beats Bobby Riggs, which wasn't just about tennis and sports. It was about women feeling powerful. But that's what the '70s, the '60s and '70s were about. It was about women's rights and civil rights and, so many rights. Vietnam was going on and just really the change. And now we're really in a different change. And I think it's very difficult for a lot of women, these young women, to understand what women in the '60s and '70s, '50s, '60s, and '70s have gone through for
Right.
our rights, and now those rights are being taken away.
I know. I know. And that's going to take me down a rabbit hole that
I know it. I know. My bad. My bad.
but no, you're good
But
because
I will say, when COVID hit, our WNBA players were instrumental in change in this country.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that fight, right? And I think there's an understanding like what you started our conversation off with is the understanding of the platform. I remember C. Vivian Stringer, and I always, when she was at Rutgers coaching, I would always just get her ear and just listen to her commenting on that foundation. You have to know where you came from to get to where you want to go. And I think for me, that will always ring true in my ears. And I know that there are so many WNBA players, 144 players who were invested in that WNBA bubble in Bradenton, Florida, who understood the assignment of that moment for not just the WNBA, but for women to stand in the gap for what is right and humane and compassionate. And I'll never forget that because everyone was watching women's sports. Everyone was watching the WNBA that summer because there was nothing else going on. Everything was shut down. Everything people were at home watching, but they also understood what the WNBA meant
Right.
in that moment. And it goes back to what you were talking about the fight for equality of opportunity that was being fought for in the 60s and 70s. And you were a part of that. And again, thank you for that because no one really talks about that enough. The
Or
found
even the women before us, whether it's suffrage or whatever. And a lot
Yeah,
of times we see that, we talk about women, but then it goes deeper. It goes deeper into, a race and
yes,
religion
yeah,
and cultures. I mean, it's just not just the gender. It is so many other things that we are made up of.
absolutely. Absolutely. With over 80% of the WNBA being Black women or Black people,
Yeah.
I think that, it just stands for, like you said, so much more. It's bigger than basketball, it's bigger than hoops. It's about the unified attack of togetherness and what that means for everyone outside of basketball. But I digress. I can go because
You need a longer show.
I know, absolutely. I mean, it means so much to me because, I saw you. I know, your story, and we're going to get further into that when we progress. But I want to go back to when you were in high school and Billy Moore was the head coach at UCLA.
Not yet. She was
No.
at she was at Cal State Fullerton, where my sister played for her.
Oh, take us through that because when you were being recruited to go to
There was no recruiting back then.
how did that okay, talk to me about okay, let me get my verbiage correct. Okay.
It's
How
all
did
good.
that process work
Well,
with
it's
Billy?
and again, it's the AAU days, and I
Okay.
know that we did have a USA team back in the '50s, and it was made up of the National Business College women and Wayland Baptist, and then
Okay.
there was a sprinkling of other women throughout the country. Um, so I know that they had talked about an Olympic team for women's basketball in '72. It did not happen. But
Okay.
my sister, she played for Lou Albrecht, who was the coach at Cal State Fullerton, and then Billy Moore moved in. She had played softball with Sharon Backus, and
Okay.
my sister played softball with Sharon and basketball and volleyball also. And Darlene May was out there. Darlene May was the first official uh, to referee an international men's basketball game, but she was the coach at Pomona. But Dar had also been a teacher over at Conley High School, which is an all girls Catholic school. My sister Patty was a teacher there. Knew Sharon Baskin. It's just kind of like all in one. But Billy came out to California from Missouri, Kansas, and her dad was a coach, and she had played softball with Sharon. She came out to California, became the coach at Cal State Fullerton
Hmm.
in 1970 when my sister Patty was a senior, and that team went on to win the national title.
Boy.
And then Billy would become the Olympic coach in '76.
Yes. Yes.
Billy would come to UCLA in 1978, my senior year,
Okay.
and
That's
we won the national title.
yes, you did.
And
Yeah.
then my brother David was at UCLA from 71 to 75 or 72 to 75, and they won the national title twice in his senior year. So
That's
I got to this whole kind of ball of yarn. Everybody's together,
yeah.
and so again, seeing my sister Patty play and all these other women play, seeing Billy coach, but they had a little friction between them. So as a young girl in elementary school and junior high, seeing my sister Patty have this friction with this coach, I had friction with this coach,
Yeah.
and so it took me a while to warm up to Billy, and Billy was wonderful as far as staying on me, and even to her last days of on this earth, that she was such a good friend and mentor to me, So I had so much respect for her, how she pushed us. And it's so funny. You look at all the coaches on the bench today and all the different people that colleges have on the bench besides the players.
Yeah.
Billy Moore and Sue Gunner were the only two coaches for the Olympic team. Sue Gunner, who a Hall of Fame coach, and played at National Business College herself, and then was at Stephen F. Austin, and then went to LSU. And you talk about the history of LSU. Um, that started with Sue Gunner.
Yes.
Kim Mulkey's done an unbelievable job, and I love what Kim's done, and not only at Baylor, but then at LSU. But Sue Gunner is the start of that,
Yes.
and the great players she had in Pokey Chapman and Tamika Johnson and Sylvia Fowles and such great players that came out.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. So, okay. So the quote unquote recruiting process, like, what was that like? How did you end up at UCLA? Like, what was that like then?
Well, again, a lot of we didn't have a lot of money. Family of 11 children. My brother David was at UCLA on a basketball scholarship. Title IX passed in '72. I was a senior in '74. I was the first high school player to make a USA national team, and so I played with a lot of gals that had played at Raytown and Wayland and Alberta Cox and Harley Redden were the coaches. So I was getting recognition. But my sister being in California, and unbeknownst to me, I'm sure Billy was being recognized as far as coaching nationally too, and so forth. And so I had no idea that I would continue playing. I played 7 sports in high school, so it wasn't just basketball. And so I didn't know where I was going to go to school because our family couldn't afford it. I probably would have ended up Cal State Fullerton because as a state school, it didn't cost anything. And it was only about 15 minutes from the house, so I'd live at home and so forth. But I thought about, I'll go to Idaho or Northern California, or should I try the Midwest? Or, I had no idea. My brother David, who was at UCLA at the time, and Title IX passed, came home one day with Kenny Washington, who had played for Coach Wooden when he was on the first 2 national titles that Coach Wooden coached at UCLA. And they were roommates. And they came home one day for a barbecue or something, and basically just said, "How'd you like to come to UCLA and play basketball?"
Oh my God.
And I said, "Okay." So I think the only school that might have recruited me because they seen me play AAU was Wayland Baptist.
Oh my
But
God.
I was a homegirl. I couldn't stay away from my mom and family. So that's right. And so Texas seemed so far away, and I didn't think Wayland was going to be a place for me, just school wise,
Yeah.
And so I was not really recruiting. Really, not hard started happening as of yet, but
Yeah.
they just came. Would you like to go to UCLA on a scholarship? I said, okay, sounds great. And my brother David was there, and UCLA was about just under an hour away from home and so
Yeah.
forth. So and it all worked out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Did it. Did it. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's such a fascinating story. And just the simplicity of that process is like mind blowing for me right now. So thank you for sharing that. But you were talking about your senior season at UCLA when in the AIAW, you were playing Maryland.
They
And
beat us. They beat us early in the year.
this is the box score of that championship game. And if you can like take a look at that on your birthday, March 25th, 1978, you woke up, you were ready to hoop that day, clearly with nearly a quadruple double. With look at your line right there. That I mean, to me, the 8 steals is something that I'm circling with a highlighter because what in the world? But you said Maryland had beaten you guys earlier in that season, and then on the run it back game, you guys won 90-74. What was that like to not only be in the championship game, but to be ready to play on your birthday of all the days, but against a team that had previously defeated you in the regular season?
Well, first, my birthday was on the 26th,
Oh,
but they celebrated it anyways on the 25th.
I
Well,
mean,
you got to lead up, So I go to UCLA, play for Kenny Washington my freshman year. A lot of high expectations because my brother David was a senior, and I truly believe to this day that myself and women's basketball does not receive the attention that it did, and really that was the starting point with Coach Wooden, John Wooden, my brother David, UCLA, and just that name and so forth. So Had a great freshman year. We went to, so back in those days, it was Immaculata and Delta State that kind of dominated the women's tournament. And but they would play 16. The 16 went to the finals. And also, my freshman year was the very first year that Kodak got involved as a major sponsor. So you had the Kodak All Americans.
That's
Women's basketball never had any of that stuff. So Kodak was the first. So I was a 4-time Kodak All American. But in saying that, the setup. So my freshman year, we played Fullerton to go to the final 16 in the regionals.
oh my god.
We get beat. We get beat. My sophomore year, coming off the Pan Am Games
Oh yeah.
in 75, come on off the Pan Am Games, we're a gold medal. We go to the World Championships and so forth. And so we have a new coach, Ellen Mosier, who I had played with and against. And
Right.
so a lot of high expectations because we were supposed to be all this and that. We lose again to Cal State Fullerton in the
Right.
regionals. And then my junior year, same thing happened. So it's like, oh my goodness, are we ever going? And these are Billy Moore teams at Cal State Fullerton with Nancy Dunkel, who was an Olympian, and she and I had played at Conley together.
Right.
And so just all, again, tie-ins, and everybody knows each other. So my senior year, I mean, we build it now. Ellen Mosier is gone after 2 years, and Billy Moore comes in. And we had a great recruiting class, our freshmen. We had Denise Curry. We had Sid Crampton, who was 6'3" at the time, 6'4", and had gotten in an awful car accident. And so it kind of brought everybody together. But, we all stayed there and supported her and so forth. But we had such great friends, Denise Corlett, Tam Breckenridge, and Diane Frierson, who was our starting point guard from Tennessee. Beth Moore was a sophomore, and Anita Ortega. And then we had, because Sid had gotten in the car accident, that Heidi Nestor stepped up, and she and I were the only 2 seniors. But still, there was this drive in me that, when are we going to get there? And it would be the first year, 1978 would be the first year that they would have a Final Four. And so and it's also the first time that we traveled. Our conference was made of 6 teams. It was San Diego State, Cal State Fullerton, UCLA SC, Long Beach State, and Northridge.
Wow.
So we just traveled. We, by car, we went, we didn't go out of state. So my senior year, we go out of state and fly back to New York to play at Madison Square Garden, Montclair State, Delta State, Rutgers, and us. And we ended up losing in the first game. And we play, I think, Rutgers, because Delta State and Lucia Harris had already graduated, but Delta State and Montclair State played in the finals at that little tournament that they had at New York. Then we go to Maryland to play in front of the men. And you know what that was like.
Yeah.
Because my brother David, who was an All-American, had played Maryland a couple times and had beaten Maryland. And so they had Lenny Elmore, they had John Lucas, they had, so those were the days that, I mean, there was such intensity with Lefty Drizel and John Wooden and the East Coast, West Coast, and my brother David. So I'm a Meyers. And so again, the crowd before the men's team, they came to our game. Those fans for the men's team came to our game, and we end up losing. And I don't recall what the score was, but I'm not a happy camper. I'm sure I got in foul trouble, did something. And we lose that game, and we lost the game in New York. So now we've got 2 losses. We go down to Greensboro to play NC State again. David Thompson, David Myers, Bill Walton. UCLA had lost to NC State in double overtime for the finals. And so again, the Myers name and so forth. Yeah. And Kay Yao is just starting her program and so forth. And they got the twins, Kay and Faye Young, the Dan and Yogurt twins, and God love them. And but we end up losing to NC State. Mm-hmm. And so I think we start out 6-3, and I'm just like, I'm devastated. And but we end up going on and going undefeated from there and winning. And the Final Four was going to be at UCLA, and it's Wayland Baptist, Montclair State, and UCLA and Maryland. And so Montclair State plays us, and Wayland Baptist plays Maryland. Maryland beats Wayland pretty good. We ended up winning pretty good against Montclair State, but Carol Blasiowski led the nation in scoring. We played with a regular-sized ball, no 3-point shot, and she averaged almost 40 points a game.
How many?
almost 40.
40. Ah,
With no three-point shot. I mean, that's how good Carol Blazejowski was, and we held her to 40. We held her to 40, and we ended up winning. But it was the biggest crowd in the women's championship game and the first Final Four. But Denise Curry was, I think, the biggest thing that Billy Moore understood personalities. She
oh,
understood our strengths, and
yeah.
after playing for her on the '76 Olympic team, I
Yes.
knew how tough she could be and what her expectations were out of you.
Yes.
And like Coach Wooden always used to say, sometimes you got to pat people on the back, other times you pat them a little lower. And I was one of those, you pat a little lower, get me going. Um, but yeah, I mean, I had great teammates. Anita Ortega, like she had said, we really played off each other so well.
Right.
And I think with her speed and her savvy, at that time it was a compliment. But O.J. Simpson was the big running back at that time, and her nickname was Juice. I mean, she brought the juice every game, and she was so intense. And then Curry was, I always compare Brianna Stewart to Denise Curry, just
Oh,
about a 3-4 inch difference. But Denise Curry was that kind of player. Could rebound, could shoot the outside shot, put the ball on the floor, and her height at 6'1", that was tall for a forward at that time.
yeah.
And but I could play all 5 positions. I was a high jumper, so I knew how to front a post, even when we played posts that were 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
Or if I got behind, I knew how to take a charge because I knew where their footwork was.
Mhm.
But steals, defense was really important to me. I loved blocking shots. I loved going for steals, and but the assists don't happen without your teammates, and your points don't happen without your teammates, and it was very much a team effort.
Oh my gosh, that's so super amazing. I know in 1976 when you were on that Olympic team, it was a silver medal, and you had some of the most Mount Rushmore people on that team, including you, obviously. But just tell us a couple of names of that 1976 silver medal team that was coached by Billy Moore.
Well, Billy Moore and Sue Gunner, I think that's the Mount Rushmore right there, and there's no question that they were the right people to coach that team. And as I said, Julian Simpson was our captain along with Pat Summitt. It was Pat Head at the time, and as a matter of fact, Pat probably wasn't going to make the team on the Pan Am team. She wasn't going to make that. She had torn her knee,
Oh,
and so her rehab. She didn't get surgery, but her rehab, and they told her that she had to get in shape and so forth, but she didn't play a lot on the '75 team. She started in '76, but Julian and Pat were the coaches, and then Pat would go on to coach internationally and be the '84 Olympic coach. And obviously, what she did at Tennessee was pretty amazing, and the players that she brought in. But and then Lieberman was didn't play a lot, but she was the youngest player on the team, and people know Nancy Lieberman, and played at ODU and won a couple of championships there, and went on to play internationally and play in the WBL one year.
yeah,
Yeah, Nancy Dunkel, who I played with, was phenomenal, and Trish Roberts, who was at Georgia State, would end up transferring to Tennessee and play for Pat for one year, and still holds records. Still holds records at Tennessee. Trish Roberts, and we just really had a group that Sue and Billy knew how to get together. But our anchor in the middle was Lucia Harris. I mean, I still base centers today because of Lucia Harris and what she did at Delta State, and just she was phenomenal, phenomenal. And then we had Charlotte Lewis, who backed her up. Charlotte was she was the head of a gang in Peoria, and she went to Illinois State, and she was about 6'2", but man, she could grab the rim,
oh my God.
and she had this big fro. We called her Peaches, and she just had a great personality and fit right in. But man, she got on the court, and you were very intimidated. But Lucia Harris, I think, at the center, who scored the very first points for the 1976 Olympics, all
Yeah.
teams, and she was fun to play with.
Oh my gosh, I've seen the documentaries on her, and
Yeah.
she had the softest hands, but the most powerful game. And the kind of oxymoron of that was beautiful to see, even though I only saw snippets of that.
Well, here's a perfect example. So Wilma Rudolph became a dear friend who was one of my idols growing up. And as fast as Wilma was, we used to play in a tennis tournament together. And she just like, don't make me run. And Lucy was the same way. Don't make me run, because Delta State was not a running team.
Okay.
She'd get down there as powerful as she was and as strong and as high as she could jump.
Yeah.
No, she did not like to run.
I love that. I love that. And this just flip forward just to that 1978 game at UCLA against Maryland, the championship game in the AIAW. That was the first televised game for women's basketball on NBC. What do you think about that now? If you go back to that moment, being on TV for the first time for women's basketball on the collegiate level, and then to where it is now, what how do you just assess the journey from that day, March 25th, 1978, to today?
Well, and I go back to Immaculata and Delta State, the excitement that they brought. And you had the nuns banging on the pots and pans and so forth. And, there was a lot of attention. Certainly they were not on TV, which is unfortunate because there was such excitement. They had great crowds for those games.
Right.
And being the Final Four, we had almost 10,000, and which was going to be the biggest crowd for a Final Four at Pauley Pavilion. And we knew that it was going to be on TV, but it wasn't. There were three channels back then: NBC, CBS, and ABC.
Yeah.
And so we were on the Wide World of Sports, I think, which was ABC. Maybe it was NBC, something else.
Yeah.
But so they didn't show our game in its entirety. But again, like I said, at UCLA in those days was Coach Wooden when my brother was playing,
Yeah.
and Bill Walton and Kareem and Lou Alcindor and Mike Warren and all those guys. So that was Hollywood. You had the Jackson Five going to the games. You had Walter Matthau. You had, the Bionic Man. You had Farrah Fawcett. You had all these actors and actresses going to the UCLA games.
Wow.
And and I said, when I was there, Dave Meyers, Annie Meyers, it was his brother-sister act. And so we had Wilt Chamberlain at our games. We had, a lot of different people that came to our games from LA, from Hollywood. And so you had that too. And so I think that attraction, and then with us knowing that we were going to be on TV, we didn't know it was going to be split up kind of thing, that the game was not shown in its entirety.
Right.
But the fact that they were there was so exciting. And I think the lead-in was the beginning of the season when we were in Maryland playing in front of the men's team. Yeah. And just the hype for that game. Being at Madison Square Garden, the hype for that game. In Greensboro, the hype for that game. So we were kind of used to it. And we had some tough games along the way. Long Beach State was a great rival for us. And I will say the other school down the road was not. We ended up beating them all 4 years. But anyways, that's here nor there. I think SC is a terrific university where they've done a great job with their women's program. And it was so unfortunate to see Juju Watkins go down. But I was at UCLA and what Corey Close has done at UCLA. And I find it fascinating that they're still not, they were ranked the number one, and they're not favored. UConn is favored because of what Gino Ariema has brought. And Gino will do a great job mentally getting his team prepared and say, well, we've never been here. This team has never been there. And we're number 2 seed. We're number, and so forth. And but UCLA has had a chip on their shoulder because the respect. Yes, Lauren Betts has had an unbelievable year. But you got Kiki Rice and London Jones will surprise you. Gabs Jaquez, and I wish the media would get her name right. They don't know how to say Jaquez. Right. The J throws them.
Yes.
Angela Duglic, who's played on the Serbian national team in the Olympics this past year. So, I mean, they've got a bench too. Barkley comes off, and Berkeley, I should say, and Dudley, and they just, I think this might be their year, but you never know. I mean, Texas feels the same way, and so does South Carolina. And Dawn, again, probably hasn't been as talented, but she's done an unbelievable job at South Carolina, and these kids have come together. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the Final Four, and the exposure that these kids have on a daily basis with social media, speaking after games. We didn't speak after games. Yeah. I mean, we as athletes, we didn't have that platform. We didn't, a lot of us didn't have that voice. I know I was very intimidated by the media, and I was not good in front of the media. Now today, these kids, by the time they're, they've got a phone in their hand by the time they're 5 years old. And so they know how to interact with people. And I find them so enjoyable and refreshing because they are their own people. They are them. And Flau'jae Johnson, after the LSU loss, I mean, she was in Morrow, I mean, I just, your heart breaks for them.
Yeah,
And we didn't have to do that. We
right.
didn't, after a loss, we didn't have to go in front of the media and speak, and how difficult that is. But these
Yeah,
young women and young men, I mean, they have the ability to do that, which,
yeah.
social media has created that.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad we didn't have to do it. I know, my junior year, we went to the Final Four, Annie, and we lost to Tennessee, and we were 29-3. That was our final record.
I remember that game.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah.
so there's no way. I was like inconsolable. Like
Yeah.
I had my hoodie. I was just like done because you don't prepare your mind as a competitor for a loss.
You're
Like
gonna win. You're
and
gonna win.
you
Yeah.
around so hard, like for me anyway, because I'm not thinking losing. I'm
Right.
like not thinking that. And then when it actually happens, it's like, what in the world? So it was very heavy. So I don't know how they were able to compartmentalize and to be so eloquent.
Well, I think what's different too, though, Christy, is that because they play at such a young age, they're playing club ball, they're playing game after game after game, they're losing. But it's not like when we played, even in
Right.
pickup game,
Right.
we lost a pickup game, we didn't play for 3, 4 more games.
That
And
was
you got, these kids, they're playing all the time. So a loss is they lose all the time.
so
And I don't think that that's good.
yeah.
Where's that fire? It's like, I don't want you to beat me. Um, but
Doesn't
I do agree with you. Is you never expect to lose.
No, super tough, super tough. And I know, I you have such a fantastically engaging personality, number one, but your journey is so fascinating to me. Just as a mom, now you have grandbabies as well, and just your entire journey is so inspiring. And I read your book, which was amazing. Number one, so you let a girl beat you, and I don't know. I didn't know the inner workings of Annie Meyers Drysdale until I read that, and the emotional sacrifices that you incurred. And I don't want to. I want you to say what you would like to say about what is in that book, but it was very moving to me that you were able. You're talking about compartmentalization. You were able to lock in and go to places for the love of the game that most people would not be able to do. There's no way. I don't know how you were able to do that, but because you did that, so many people are better for your example of inner fortitude and strength.
Well, thank you. But I think a lot of it is we talked at the very beginning of that support system. And I looked at my mom, who's, just was phenomenal. So here's a woman who raised 11 children. Her husband left her after 30 years, and she lost 4 children. And so to have the strength and the courage to get up every morning, and then I would lose my husband in 93 after our daughter was born in 3 months. And you have this woman that's gone through so much that how can I not? How can I not? And you have that support. Again, Don's family was very supportive. My mom and my sisters and brothers were very supportive. And I made decisions professionally that probably, would be somewhere else in my career
Mhm.
if I had chosen to do those things.
Right.
But I knew that I needed to be home with my 3 children. The boys were 5 and 3. My daughter was 3 months
Mm.
when Don passed away. But I'm sure that they feel that I left them, that
Yeah.
I made choices against them. And so you can't win. We know as women, and even another 100 years from now, women are going to feel the same way. Working, being a parent, being a wife, being a mom or a grandmother, and it just we're torn. We're always going to be torn.
Right.
What do we do? And I don't care what position you're in, whether you're a CEO or whether you're a teacher and so forth. We're just because we love our family so much and we're nurturers
Yeah.
and you want to do the right thing, but we're also powerful women, as you talked about earlier,
Yeah.
that we want to do what we make a difference. And so you make choices what you hope are good choices, and we don't always make the best choices, but at that time that's what you think you need to do, and you go with it.
Yeah. Woo, you got me good right there. As a mom of three, I feel that all the way to my soul. But
And
yeah,
even in 11 children, Christy, it's like on you didn't love me enough, you weren't there for me, and so now that we're parents, you're like going, oh my gosh, we said that to our mom, we said that to our dad, and it's like, how do you think they felt? It's like you didn't. How come you didn't have dinner ready for me? And how come you didn't come to my practice? And how you it's like what? Because you're being pulled, and you're
Yeah.
serendipity. You want to be split into 10 different people so you can do all that stuff.
No doubt. I mean, that is totally me. And if anybody knows me well, they know that to be very true for me. And every decision that I've made, I feel like I've made it around how to be the best mom, right?
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
that's and
But yet
still,
but yet you are great at what you do too. Not
mm,
only as a mom and as a wife, and as a daughter and a sister, but also as a professional.
and I appreciate that because I always feel like, I mean, as competitors who are now moms, right? It's so hard because you always want to leave on a make, right? When you leave the gym,
Right, right.
you don't want to anything, and it's like I don't know. I just feel like that's the competitive spirit of motherhood. Especially if you've been an athlete, like you don't
Yeah,
leave on a miss.
right.
Um,
Well, God's up there laughing at us making plans.
oh, I know.
Like,
Plans. Oh my gosh. Oh man, that's totally my journey in the thick of it. Clearly, right now, with all these emotions bubbling
you're
up,
doing good. You're doing good.
I'm trying to hang in there. Uh, but I guess just before we go, I just want to just tap into what you're doing now and how you are continuing in your role to grow the game. I know at the WNBA All-Star game last summer, you and Cheryl Miller were the coaches, and you have something similar that's coming up this weekend. And
Yeah, and I really think that that loss that the Olympic team had in that All Star game, I think that helped them push them through for a gold medal.
yes,
I think Cheryl Reeve probably said, "Okay, we got to get all our ducks in order here."
yeah,
And but it was so much fun to be a part of that All Star team, and a lot of those women that did not make the Olympic team or in the past, they had a chip on their shoulder. They wanted something to prove,
yeah,
and Cheryl, I've known Cheryl since she was in high school, and she's just such a joy, and I have so much respect for her. And I've always said that even when I broadcasted her game, she's a Pied Piper.
yeah,
She's a Pied Piper, and the only one that came close to that as a Pied Piper is Diana Taurasi.
yeah.
And now I see Asia Wilson as
Yes,
that, but
yeah,
and Caitlin's got a little bit of that. But again, here's now we're into a generation of the social media and the Nil and Angel Reese and all these other young women taking. But Cheryl Miller to me was the Pied Piper, and so now I get to be by her side and Cynthia Cooper to coach one of the All-Star WVCA All-Star teams.
yeah.
And so I'm excited about that. And plus the fact that UCLA is in the Final Four and going to be there with all the other UCLA alumni and a lot of players that played at UCLA. And we're all coming out. And this is such a special team, this 225. And a lot of people are saying, well, aren't you jealous? And people have asked a lot of us that played on the 78 team or the 80 team. And I said, no, this is their time. We are so proud of these young women and all the women. But, obviously being an alumni as you are with your team. And certainly these women have worked hard to be where they are. And Corey Close and her coaching staff has just been amazing. And she's a John Wooden disciple. And I just love her intensity. And I called her games when she was at Santa Barbara. So I know what kind of determination and perseverance that she has as a coach and how much she cares. And I think that's the great coaches really stand out, that players don't care how much they just want to know that you care. And that's why I always find it fascinating that these players go into the portal, the transfer portal. And I'm like going, wow. I mean, you've got some really unbelievable coaches that have sacrificed for them to take such personal interest in the player, and then the player leaves. And you're like going, wow, you can't worry about it. You got to move on.
Yeah,
That's that day and age.
yeah. No, I wouldn't be able to do it. I don't know. Like it was such a no-no, when I was playing to
Yeah,
transfer, right? And now
right.
it's commonplace with like 1,000 kids in the portal is bananas to me. And whatever their reasoning is, that's on them, and I'm not evaluating that. But
Absolutely. Absolutely.
emotionally, like you want to be tapped into your team and leave a legacy and be where your feet are. And I
Well,
think,
I have so much respect, honestly, for Haley Van Lith. You know
yes,
how difficult the media was, and I will say that I think Becky Hammond was probably the first, because when she played on the Russian Olympic team, and people were like, "Oh my god," and I was one of them. I was, because I grew up in that, like, United States against the Eastern Bloc countries, And
Yeah.
Becky got ripped. Becky was really criticized. She said, "I wanted to play in the Olympics. I didn't know how else to. I wasn't going to make the USA team."
Right.
And so it's not. And it's not that she was the first that we recognized, because there were a lot of other athletes that played for different countries.
Right.
And but Becky really felt the heat of it. And now when Haley Van Lith left Louisville and went to go play at LSU, and as tough as it was at LSU with Kim,
Yeah.
it made Haley a better player. Because she got through a lot of difficult things, and then to transfer to TCU, and she talked about such an emotional, um, talk that she gave after their loss, and
Yes.
about her journey and the mental health and the social media and how people are against her and so forth. And you just think, this is a young woman that just wants to play ball,
Right. And
and so we have to be a little bit more forgiving.
yes, and give more grace, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has their own journey. We don't know. We know their stats. We don't know what's going on inside of these
Right. Right.
moments. Let them live, man, and let them play the game that they love. And with all the betting and everything, I've seen the commercials like stop threatening these kids. I'm like, people are doing that. You know,
Yeah. Sad.
Fathomable to me that it is. The negative side of it has been so egregiously rude.
Yeah.
But yeah, give these kids grace. They just want to hoop. Let them hoop. But speaking of hooping, I know the Final Four is right in front of us. We're on the precipice of that. And you were talking about how you called Corey Close's games, you called Cheryl Miller's games. Cheryl Miller actually called the game that we had to win at Texas to qualify for that game against Tennessee in the Final Four. Cheryl Miller was the analyst on the game for ESPN, and I, in the layup line, who was marveling at the fact that Cheryl Miller is sitting over there. I was getting
Yeah.
basketball because I was fixated on her at the
I
table.
love that.
And I
Yeah.
was oh, they're like, Christy, the basketball. I was like, oh, okay, and I go in and do the layup line. But, it's just the whole full circle and the fruits of so much labor, Annie, that is so beautiful to me that I can't quantify the thankfulness of you being who you are for the game. And not only that, but you're continuing to pour into the game. And I was at UCLA last week, saw you there, obviously, and there were like just 10-year-olds coming up to you. You were that 10, 11-year-old girl who your parents fought for you to play on the
Yeah.
after school team. And that's what I saw in that moment. And I walked by you and, you got up to take a picture with her and we caught eyes. And those are the special things I think that people don't understand, like the full circle and the depth of the journey and the sacrifices that were made years ago for moments like that one. Watching players like Lauren Betts compete the way that she did, another double double, and it's just for me that will never be lost on me. The special moments and running into Cheryl Miller in Texas at the Final Four because I was turned to speak to someone and she walked right by and I couldn't get up fast enough to grab her by the shoulders and thank her too. And that's just where I am. I don't know if, like you said, this generation understands full on. They know who the people are, but do they understand full on what it has taken for everyone to be watching women's sports right now?
Amen. Amen.
I am just so grateful for the path that you have laid the foundation for. You're continuing that with the Phoenix Mercury, who just cracked open this enormous workout facility, Diana Taurasi's signature on the floor, and just the movement of the moment and how it has not stopped. In the 70s, it is what it is, and you did what you had to do then. But like you said, it's the time now for these young women to take the torch and sprint with that thing and continue to grow the game. And I just want to thank you. And I know the Final Four is coming up, and I know who you're going to say if I say who you're pulling for, because you're not going to
Blue
say.
and gold, baby.
I love it. I love it. But I love the fact also that you were sitting courtside with Cheryl Miller when USC and UCLA played, and Reggie was there too. Reggie Miller was there as well, and just the
Well,
whole.
and he had the right colors on.
He had the right colors on. He had the right colors on. But this is going to be such a fascinating Final Four. I
Yeah.
know, the matchups are what they are in this one, and I think defense is going to win out. What's your
Always does. Always does.
to win? What's it
No,
going to?
it's it comes down to turnovers, mistakes. I think even though Gino will say this is a young team and so forth, they've never been there, but he has been there. And I think that Connecticut has played in enough big games. This team that they have, even though they've got some young players, they've got a lot of grad students and seniors that are veteran players. And so, when you're in front of this kind of crowd, and you know that TV is there, even though these kids have played in front of TV their whole careers, we had not. But there's a nervousness. It's a big stage, and certainly I think that same thing. South Carolina, they've been there. Texas has not gone this far in a long time. I mean, you think of their history with Jody Conrad and the great players that have come out of there, and her team go, Cammie Etheridge, and they go undefeated and so forth. But the history that Texas has. So I think that Booker's such a terrific player, but it's going to come down to, certainly you don't want to see anybody in foul trouble. You don't want to see the refs control the game, and but it comes down to execution.
Yeah.
The ball's got to go in,
Yeah.
but defense is going to be a key, and who plays the best defense. They always talk about points, points, points. Hey, as long as you have one more point, it's like Duke. Duke what was that score? 47-39 or something like that the other day. But
Yeah.
it's about what Carol Lawson brings to that team with defense. It's because she played for Pat Summitt at Tennessee. And Pat will always tell you that it was defense and rebounding. So, and Connecticut's got some really good, strong kids inside. And Lauren Betts has got her work cut out of her. And I think there's no question that teams have done great jobs. That she'll have 4 people on her. And so it's a matter of passing and turnovers and execution. But you're right, defense and rebounding always.
Yeah, I remember Lauren Betts. I mean, when she got loaded up on, I think it was against Minnesota during the Big Ten season, she had 11 assists, the career high. So, I mean, she's a capable passer.
Well, and this would happen with Brittany Griner. Brittany Griner gets, so sucked in with the defense, and she became a much better passer. I think one of the best doing that and learned how to do it was Lisa Leslie.
Yes.
And Lisa Leslie would get the ball inside, and people converge on her. And it took her a while to understand how and when to pass out of that double or triple or quadruple team. And Lisa was one of the best at it.
Yeah, for sure. And where, right? It's always that
Yeah.
skip pass that she was able to find. It seems like I just picture
Right.
her sitting at opposite wing. But for me, Annie, if there's one thing that you learned about yourself or about the game during your time at UCLA, maybe one of your biggest memories or something that helped you develop who you are today as your role with the Phoenix Mercury, the Phoenix Suns, the WNBA, and everything that you're involved with right now. If there's one thing that you can go back and make a touchstone, like this is where I go back when I need a reset mentally, what would you say that
Yeah,
would?
that's a great question, Christy. But it's just you go back to your history in life and the people that have touched it and made a difference, and how you treat people with kindness. Whether my parents taught me that, my siblings, whether elementary school teachers, junior high, high school, whatever, college coaches and teachers, John Wooden, Billy Moore, Sue Gunner. So many people have impacted me, but you give back. I'm involved with something in Phoenix, Elevate Phoenix. Rayford Johnson, who was a dear friend, involved with Special Olympics for years when I first got there to UCLA in 1975. And it just, you've got to give back to the community, and because so many people gave to you. And I think it's important that you've got to help others when they're down.
I love that. And now you have some grandbabies. I want you to shout out your kiddos and your.
Well, I have one. I have a granddaughter. She's 2, and my son Darren and his wife Sam, and my son DJ and his wife Chelsea are working on it. And then my daughter Drew's just met a young man. They've been together for a little bit, so we'll see what happens.
Oh my goodness. What a beautiful story and a beautiful journey. And so you let a girl beat you. Yes,
I'm blessed. I'm blessed in so many ways, and now I have a friend with you too.
absolutely. Every day, all day. And I cannot wait to put my arms around you again in Tampa in just a few days. But again, just your graciousness will always mean so much to me. Your ability to continue to grow the game will always be an example of how to do it with grace, with respect, and with concise love and passion that continues to ooze from you. 7-sport athlete in high school is amazing. 11 sibling, well, 11
Well, I
No.
well, Chrissy, it's just, and so proud of what you have done and keep doing what you're doing. You're making the right choices, whether it's with the broadcasting, whether it's within your community and with your family. You always make the right choices. So keep doing it.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna take me a long way, and I'm tucking that right in my little heart right now. And I appreciate you so much, Annie, for joining us right here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast network for In the Paint with Christy Winters Scott, Annie Meyers Drysdale. All love. I
All love.
grab you. I'm gonna grab you when I see you. Thank you.